Appreciate it. I am a second-generation HR person. Does anybody in here have that? No. Okay. You? Yes, good, good. We know each other. That's even more odd. But yes, my father started working for this company, a little bitty company in Atlanta back in the 60s, and they were pioneering ways to safely store and package food. So if you've ever gotten to a Lay's bag and couldn't open it up, it's because of their remarkable engineering feats. So congratulations to them. I've got a topic today, and I know the conference is focused on leadership, and I think that one of the main things before you even talk about leadership is really ethics. It's been in the news a lot lately, obviously with the Wells Fargo situation and some other things. And when we were talking about coming to the conference, it's one of those areas that I just want to talk through what we've got going on. This subject can become almost preachy, and even though it's Sunday in the South, I'm not interested in that at all. I've already been to church today, so I've gotten what I need. But I want to have a dialogue with you as I share kind of what Affleck has done. As Mark mentioned, the vast majority of my time actually is spent in Tokyo. Affleck, you probably recognize Affleck by the duck that comes on and interrupts your college games. That's deliberate. We try and only advertise in live sports because no one else, with the advent of TiVo and all these other things, no one watches television anymore. So we try and we limit our advertisement to live sporting events. But we started out in Japan back in the 70s, early 70s, right before they nationalized healthcare. We were invited in by the government, one of several firms that was invited in. And we provide really everything from supplemental insurance all the way up to income assurance products there. We've been there about 40 years. And it is, the U.S. operation's about an $8 billion company. The Japanese operation's about a $26 billion company. It's that much bigger. I was telling Mark this morning that the Japanese are extraordinarily culturally risk averse. There's a lot of reasons for that. But it is not uncommon to find yourself in a very, very long line in Tokyo shopping for insurance on Saturday morning. I told Mark that story, and he was like, what are you talking about, insurance on Saturday morning? But they do. They're very committed to making sure they have hedged their personal risk. So with that, I'm going to get through a couple of these slides. We're going to talk about, I'm going to give you a little of the background. Whenever I do these things, you want to establish a level of credibility to the person that's talking, as well as the world that they come from. Affleck in general has really kind of set a benchmark for a lot of things in HR, but particularly around ethical leadership. The reason why you're seeing a picture of my family, I'm generally not crazy about showing pictures to, but it's highly unlikely anyone's ever going to go to Columbus here. So you'll never run into these humans. But why ethics are important to me is primarily because of them. Primarily because I realize that my reputation is tied to them and vice versa. And as we go through this presentation, we're not going to talk about how we necessarily have a secret sauce, although it's mentioned in here in our most ethical write-up. But ethics begins with us, begins with you, begins with our leadership, and we're going to talk about several examples of that. And you'll find out that it's very difficult to teach ethics. If your mom hasn't taught you, or dad hasn't taught you, or guardian hasn't taught you that, it's very difficult for a corporation to teach you ethics. And so we're just going to go through a few things here. That's a shot from Affleck every year. You see that building in the background. It is the tallest building in Columbus. It's 14 stories tall. That's right. Think about that in the valley. That's my family. Every year we do this. We light the tower up in the form of a Christmas tree. So my father there, he's moved down to Columbus since then. It's my bride and my children and my little boy he's something. So we'll just continue on here. Okay. We have successfully navigated a host of awards over the years at Aflac. And you'll find out why. I mean, whether it's world's most admired, best places to work, the most ethical companies in the world, we really pride ourselves on primarily focusing on a workforce that is very connected with taking care of our employees. For those of you that have participated in this process and getting on these lists, it's not easy. Most of these things are, they're random votes from people in the firm. But basically what we try and do is we try and build a personal relationship with every single employee that we have. From an HR perspective, that's very complicated, as you can imagine, and somewhat risky. Relationships are complicated and hard, but we believe that relationships are hard to quit, even bad ones. We hope it's a good one, but we want to build relationships with people. And we believe that's the kind of foundation of the reason why we've been so successful and shown up on these lists. 2017 marked the 10th year that we were recognized as the most ethical company in the world, particularly around insurers. Insurers tend to struggle in this category. We have not. We were on the list when it was first introduced back in 2007 and have maintained our status on that. We've seen a lot of growth over the years and a lot of advancements in how they actually score this exam. But again, this is just a little bit of background to at least give you some confidence that I have some experience in this matter. And really what we're trying to do here, it really is the secret sauce of Aflac, is that we not only hire but continually develop ethical leaders. Well, how do we do that? I was at a recent conference a couple of months ago, and this head of HR got up and said, well, we spend most of our time trying to hire nice people. And I thought, well, that's not, what does that mean? Nice to me and you are really different things. And how do you identify a nice person, right? And so I kept, there's all this back and forth room like this. I just kept being more and more unsatisfied with, I wonder if I have any nice people. How would I hire nice people? It was just a very frustrating back and forth. And I think about it in this way. I would never tell you that, well, what we do is we hire ethical people, right? That's not really helpful to the practitioner. What we try and do through various activities, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes, is to ensure that the people that work for us not only have an ethos, an ethics, a value, a culture that matches our own, which is all connected, but we have an environment that it is safe to practice those activities, right? It's one thing to have an open door policy, but if nobody is willing to walk through those doors, it's not super helpful in my experience. So you can have an open door policy. Hey, you can come talk to us anytime you want to, but we're going to talk about how we get that. And again, if your mom or dad or guardian did not teach you ethics, we can't either. We just can't do it. It's very difficult for us to change the core of how someone operates, and we believe that ethics is really something that is learned and normalized in a person over a lifetime of experience. It's not just at the workplace, even though obviously we all spend the vast majority of our time at work. For us, it starts with the application, ends with exit interviews. I'm racing through this on purpose because I want to leave time for interaction. I'm actually far less interested in what I have to say and far more interested in what you may want to talk about. So if you feel like I'm going too fast, it's deliberate. This is as fast as a Southerner can go, I assure you. This is max out. Right? I'm holding back my accent quite a lot, even though folks in the back are probably like, this guy's crazy. So it goes from the application process, new employee orientation. What does that mean at Affleck? It means a four-day away from work interaction with people like me and our CEO and our CFO and our chief learning officer and our general counsel's officer. So what we're trying to do is, again, build relationships. You're probably saying, well, how do you do that? Well, it's basically once a month, and if you've been hired in that time period, we bring you in and we just basically wash you in the history and the culture of the corporation, and we get you interacting with people that you're going to see and hear about, so you can start detecting their character and watching their behaviors and seeing if those things are consistent. Because it's one thing to say you have ethics. It's a whole other thing to practice it and let people see your interactions as being ethical, right, as you go through this process. Annual testing, we have a code of ethics, not only seminar, we dedicate a week of the corporation's time to not only going through a formalized process of testing and making sure that people understand if any changes have happened, but making sure that they understand that this is super important to us. And in exit interviews, right, which is I'm sure you're all doing in some capacity, we comb through these things for specific ethical triggers, right? Well, I liked Aflac, I had to move away, but oh, by the way, I had this weird interaction with Matthew, and you ought to look into it. We take these things really seriously because we realize that it only takes one or two people that have this perspective that Matthew may not be completely honest, and we need to go talk to Matthew and say, okay, we've gotten this concern, right? And we need to talk about, is it your mannerisms, is it your actions, or is it just you, and how do we fix that? These are not earth-shattering things here that you can do, but we believe that our leadership is either the make or the break of all of our ethics and values, period, end of story. Now, there is a subtle nuance to Affleck that you should kind of be aware of. Affleck's current leader has been with the company 42 years. He is the son of one of the founders of the corporation. And so not only being in sort of a small southern town with a fairly tightly gripped associate population, you have all this history and expectations of performance, and it's almost like it's such a family dynamic. There's both good and bad. We can talk about the bad. The good is that you have this pride about being connected to this family that has done all these wonderful things and really made a difference in fighting pediatric cancer and providing people with a way to stay out and reduce the instances of bankruptcy due to cancer and leukemia and those things like that. But you have this natural, almost familia pride that I showed you in the beginning that I'm not gonna do X, Y, or Z. I'm not gonna compromise this, that, or the other like I wouldn't compromise my family. It's sort of a naturally occurring thing in the environment. And even as we've expanded pretty dramatically over the past 5 years, we've been able to maintain that activity. I think partly because we hire pretty slowly. It takes us a long time to hire somebody, and we don't acquire a lot of companies, so we don't have all this mismatch of different cultures coming in at one time. And so it's easy to, as you hire between 400 and 500 and maybe sometimes 600 people a year in Columbus, and we talk about the processes in Japan, which are very similar, you can control how people are coming in and how they're integrating into the firm in a lot different way. And I know if you're on an acquisition binge or you're just growing, it's very, very difficult because eventually, your culture basically is who you are. And if you start hiring more people from the outside that exist on the inside, and particularly at the leadership level, you just expect some cultural cracks and breaks. Fortunately for us, we have, somewhat of a cliche to say, our leadership is primarily developed and promoted from within. So if you become a senior vice president, executive vice president at Aflac, it's highly likely that you've been there a very long time. I think I'm a little bit of an outlier because they were desperate at the time. So they kind of just went, we'll see what happens with him. Keep him on a short leash. But our leaders matter. Why? Well, you can have all the fancy ethic. You can have all the fancy little, your little card on your badge that talks about your values. But you've got to figure out whether they matter or not. For those of you that are old enough to remember the Enron values, communication, respect, integrity, and excellence, my guess is that actually wasn't what they valued. That's just my guess. Or maybe integrity is number 3 deliberately, right? It's kind of the third place in the line of the fourth. But the point of this is a great illustration. I remember this very, very distinctly. I remember watching in horror as you saw this CNN and MSNBC and CNBC, the footage of people pouring out of the offices at, in Enron World Headquarters and boxes and just lives are shambles, and it was just awful. And all of that history was just lost in this little bit of time and these few people that just completely undermined what was presumably a pretty well-performing company. But your leaders matter. This is not a scene that we want to have at Affleck. This is obviously not a scene, as you remember the recent issue with Wells and the notion of our CEO sitting in front of congressmen is just unimaginable to us. It's just unimaginable to us. We cannot imagine a scenario where our general counsel, our CEO, just imagine, is anybody at Wells here that's, okay. Well, if you were, I'd be praying for you. Just imagine the work that it took to prepare that person to sit in front of Congress, right? I can just imagine, I've got our board of directors in town tomorrow is our annual shareholders meeting, And it's a very good event, right? It's all happy, but it's an enormous amount of work to prepare the CEO and the leadership team for these things. I just cannot imagine preparing them to walk down the street in handcuffs. It just doesn't sound very appealing. I rarely give quotes to people. I've got several in here just to kind of get your mind thinking about. I'm going to read this. It's an interesting quote I found as I was preparing for this. Warren Buffett said, someone once said that in looking for people to hire, you look for three qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. If you don't have the first, the other two will kill you. And if you think about it, it's true. If you hire somebody without integrity, you want them to be dumb and lazy. You don't want them to be like the Enron folks, right? Excited, they were at work, really doing some serious hardcore damage to the corporation. If you have people that don't have integrity, you want them to be pretty boring. For what kind of leaders? We follow generally the GE model around leadership at Aflac with some definite exceptions. I grew up at General Electric. It's still, it's still a pretty big core of how I think about philosophically in HR and development. But what I wanted to point out here is these just commonalities in senior leaders who see the matter of ethics the same, right? The number 4, you can read these, the kind that makes their numbers but doesn't live our values, super dangerous in the firm, right? If you've got these people in there, we call them, kind of like the brilliant jerks, right? People that they deliver results, but they leave this gigantic wake of human suffering and bodies. They do not last long at the Affleck Corporation. And you got to be careful if you're tolerating these people, because if they're not living your values, even if you don't have these hardcore ethical type values, it's just a matter of time until something comes up that you're going to have, or they'll have a difficult time explaining. Dan Amos, good friend of mine, our CEO. This is all really about the culture and consistent things that I get the opportunity to work with Dan literally every single day. He likes to say that bad news doesn't get better with time. It's a very true kind of, from the South, it's a very common thing to say, is that, just get it out, right? Just let us know what's going to happen. Let us be able to prepare. It's much better for me to, tell Dan, about that, 162M thing we talked about. I would hate for him to find that out down the chain and him know that I knew about it but didn't tell him. We're very encouraged to share and be truthful now, right? The coach of Duke's basketball team likes to talk about, we want the truth and we want it now, this minute. Not some version of the truth, not some delayed perspective on the truth. The truth is what we want. But Dan is one of these guys that, he's just established a culture where it's okay to say, yeah, I made a mistake, or we thought it was this and now it's that. But the sooner you do that, the better off everybody is. We're fortunate to have a guy that's been around and grown up in the company a long time to be able to do that. The Affleck Way basically is our book of values and code of conduct. It actually is a leather-bound book. It looks biblical in nature. I'm not sure who did it. This predates Matthew. But it's something that we really take pride in, and it's something that really matters to us. It's not just a few notes on the back of a card. It's actually things that we truly value, right? Like hard work and taking care of our customers, and cover your customer and your team, not you, right? Start with other people, right? It's very kind of golden rule-ish, if you will, and it's filled with lots of examples about what matters to us. Because if you think about what we do and what we're in the business of, an insurance company is in the business of making a promise real, right? You're in the business of making a contracted agreement work. So without a promise, there really is not an insurance company. And on top of that, we get 300,000 phone calls a year in the U.S. into our call center. 80% of those are from people who had the worst day they've ever had. You've got cancer, right? So if you're a call center person and you're getting 16 to 20 calls like that a day, and you don't feel like the company is honest and is going to take care of you, your interaction with a person that just got the worst news of their life is totally different, totally different. And it's super important for us because we recognize that it's, what we're doing is really caring for people. Our employees have to feel like there's a backdrop of trust and integrity and honesty and ethical behavior that can back all this up. And it's just, for us, it's very simple. We start with our business model, which is making a promise and keeping a promise. And so it's just natural that we would have people and expectations and a culture that is one that can be honest and believed in. Code of ethics, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning. Leadership development is really nothing without ethics. If you can't get that right, then don't even bother training people on how to split atoms. Just forget about it. There's no value in doing it, because it won't last long. It's much better time spent ensuring that the people that you have, that you will develop, are principally seen as people that are ethical, or all the good work that you do from a leadership development perspective will be shaded with, well, yeah, they developed this brilliant jerk, well done, right? Or this person that, yeah, sometimes they're not really trustworthy. Well, if you're sometimes not trustworthy, then kind of all the time not trustworthy in our book. So if you don't have ethics at Aflac, you don't get very far. And then in HR and leadership development specifically, and I mentioned this a roundabout way, talking about having an open door policy. Everybody's got an open door policy, I get it. But are you being an ethical leader on your team in the small and the large? Right? I mean, it starts with, and this will sound silly, but it starts with being on time for appointments and, meetings that start and end on time. It's the little bitty things around the edge that make people believe whether or not you're an honest person or not. The little tiny little things, over and over, hundreds of little things, right? I never respond back to an email, or I never return this person's phone call. Well, it erodes people's trust and credibility in the function. And at Aflac, really, the HR organization is the pillar of all we do from an employee perspective, given that we have this very unusual, in my experience, view of how important our employees are. HR really is not only at the table, sometimes overly at the table, so I have to kind of dial it back, but it is just assumed that in HR there's a higher standard of ethical behavior. If you're the source of ethics, you really should be better at it and more consistent at it than everybody else and leading the way on it. I'm going to probably pause. I've only got a few more things to say, and have interactions. Nobody's given me any crazy signs from the back of the room yet, so I must be on time. I don't wear a watch for a lot of reasons. No interactions? None. Oh, good. Hi, I know you. You're doing that on purpose.
No, I do know.
You actually have a question? Okay.
I hate the awkward silence sometimes.
I don't mind it. I can stand up here and look at y'all for the next 15 minutes, no problem.
So I did, but first I have a comment, which is, I'm thrilled that we're starting the summit on ethics. I think it's foundational. So whoever planned that, whether it was they gave you open topic and you.
They gave me an open topic. I'm not taking any credit for it, but they did give me an open topic.
I think it's a perfect way to start. But the question is, do you, when you said it starts with the application process, is it that black and white when you're interviewing someone, or you finding an applicant, that you can kind of predict whether they could have some, ethical wavering, we'll call it, if they were doing that?
I will tell you, absolutely it is. The way we do interviews, you may scoff to a degree, but we do panel interviews and team interviews. So I'm talking and you're watching, right? You're watching body language and effect, and they made that same eye movement as they said this 3 different times. Those little things were very. I mean, it is in a non-weird way. We're trying to figure out if we're going to date, right? So we have lots of people looking at that, because the average person at Aflac has been there 18 years, right? This is a call center, heavily call center environment. Our turnover is less than 6%. The turnover that we do have, 80% of it's because of spousal relocation. We are very close to one of the largest military bases in the world, Fort Benning. So people come in and they leave because their spouses get transferred and sent off to who knows where. So we're absolutely, you can detect it. But it's easier for all of us to see it at once than it is, we're going to go through an interview today, and we're going to, how many people have y'all interviewed? This room's probably interviewed tens of thousands of people collectively. But when you do it as a team, there's a few things that happen. One, if you do it over a cycle, you can see who this person is, because we're actually, by the time a person comes to interview us, and that we know that they're technically qualified. It's all about, can you fit in this kind of weird culture? And this culture is describably weird. There's a lot of things I can tell you, you'd go, man, that's a weird place to work. And it is from a standpoint of, they want to have relationships with you, which is very strange to me. Even though I grew up most of the time in the South, I'm really funny about who knows the bride and the parents but that is core to them knowing who you are. Or maybe you don't have a family. That tells us something about you, and it's not negative or positive. It's just things they want to know about you. Long way around of telling you, absolutely, we can detect it. And yes, of course, you can detect it with a drug and background screen too. We have that going on. But if you've got 15 money laundering convictions, tells us that you get a lot of time on your hands. Clever, probably clever. Yes, sir. Thank you for the question.
2 questions.
Okay.
One, do you have any upfront assessments to measure certain things about integrity or personality? And 2, are you doing any yearly or year surveys to measure pulse music?
We don't have any tests, which is something that we've talked about a lot, and I've gotten a lot of pushback about it. They believe that their capabilities, especially at the leadership level, are good enough and experiential enough not to require that type of an assessment. The assessments, we have a very culturally conservative legal environment at Aflac, meaning that we don't want any trouble. And we don't even want to get near trouble. And it's one of those things that no one's really interested in wasting any corporate capital on pushing it, least of all me. You start talking about, yeah, we need to do some, some personality assessments, Myers-Briggs. No, DISC. The second question was, do we do a survey? We do a survey every year, every 18 months. It's built into our engagement survey. There's an entire portion that's been cleverly designed to tell us how much our population trusts our leadership. That's where we get it, is that our employees, little known to them, are answering questions that aren't worded necessarily like, do you trust your leader? But they get to the point of, can I trust this person? Are they honest? Do they act in integrity? Are they consistent? Are they reliable? Those kind of things. It's built into our engagement survey that we spend quite a bit of time on. We take it crazy serious. I've never seen a company, these people get celebratory over, yay, we got results, and now we get to go work. It's crazy. It's something. Yes, ma'am, in the back. I'll get to all of you, I promise. If I don't, I'll wait and talk to you afterwards.
You indicated that you guys have an 18-year tenure. How do you attract millennials in your workplace?
Well, it's easy, believe it or not. 40%, right at 40%, 39 and something. I looked at the stats before I left my home this morning. We have our millennials in our workforce. And I'm not certain, I think it's because we have, to them, a very familiar culture. Millennials have grown up in families that have loved them, teachers that have loved them, administrators, coach, maybe too much. Maybe I get that. I'm an Xer, so I'll reserve comment. And so to come to Aflac, it's very familiar to them, is that, we're going to help you, we're going to develop you, we're going to be involved with your life. Some of you may have heard me talk about the Career Success Center. We have an entire division of HR that's dedicated to individual development at the base level of the corporation. That's part of it, but I think the other part of it is that, certainly it's somewhat of captive of employment environment. There's not a lot of Aflacs in Columbus, Georgia, although there are 3 other fairly large corporations. I think people generally like working places where they trust the leadership. And our leadership is extraordinarily, I would probably argue, overly visible, right? It is not uncommon for our CEO and his whole crew to be walking around, driving you crazy all day, destroying all your bandwidth with interactions. So they're out and about all the time, right? We do formalize things, but these folks are out, right? The general counsel's out, CFO's out, they're out. They show up places so you get to know these people, and they're consistent, and you just believe them because you have this relationship to them. So, yes, sir, and I'll go this way.
Hey, Matthew, Kevin.
Hey.
this may be too much in the weeds, and I apologize, but I love asking people what their favorite interview questions are. So I'm building a whole cadre of great interview questions.
Okay.
So what would be one of your best ethics questions, one or two of your best questions that get to that idea of ethics?
My first question for anyone that interviews me is, and it'll get to this, and I can explain it in further detail, is who are you? Like, who are you? Like, tell me who you are. Are you parent? Are you guardian? Are you, like, who are you? Right? And within about 3, because humans love to talk about themselves. Love, 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 love. So if you can start with who are you, they will generally tell you something about them that can, give you an indication of how ethical or, whether or not they're going to fit in the culture. That's a super fast way. I've got several of them. I try not to stump people that are involved with my interviews. I'm going to go to her, and then I'll come to you, and then I'm going to go right back around. Yes, ma'am.
We often talk about when interviewing the idea of culture, and sometimes
Yeah.
that can mean the same as me. So how do you make sure when you're talking about a cultural fit that you're still not having a ton of bias and you are hiring people that do generate new ideas and challenge the status quo?
Yeah, that's a good question. Not because every question's good, because it's complicated to answer. That is one of the things that's remarkable about Aflac is that I would tell you that I believe it's due, the reason why we have people that are innovative and always stretching, and there's we do new product introductions every 18 months, and how do you get that? I honestly believe it's because of the openness and the ability to go and have a bad idea and nothing, happen poorly for you, because we have this relationship with you. We want to have a relationship with you. So if you're in a relationship with somebody that has a bad idea, you don't go, well, you're out of here, Mr. Bad Idea. I would have been probably kicked out a long time ago. But I think it's all linked, is that when you live in this culture that is open to honest and candid feedback and interaction, and we have this relationship, I would argue that it invites innovation and change and perspectives, because people don't have fear, right? When the fear veil is gone. I'm not saying that everybody walks around in some kind of kumbaya moment, but I'm just saying that they don't have a fear of expressing themselves or an idea because something horrible will happen to them. Is that helpful? Okay, good. There was 2 up here. Hey.
One was a follow-up to the other question.
Okay, good. I'll see if I can remember it.
I'll tell you.
Okay, good. Even better.
It was favorite question. And
Favorite
who are
interview
you?
question. Who are you?
This was favorite. Who are you? And I was saying, when you ask such a question, how much time do you expect the candidate to give you the gist of what you want? Because if you ask me such a question, I could take a whole day.
Good.
Take 3 minutes.
Good, because I got plenty of time.
Yeah, so how much time do you generally expect
The average answer,
to get the gist?
yeah. I will wait all day for it. Just to answer your question more, like technically, you can talk to me all day long. The more the better, actually. The average person is stunned by it, right? Totally stunned, right? Because think about it, they don't know which direction. It's not a trick question, but if somebody said who you are in an interview context, what would you say? You would probably say something, well, I'm an accountant, right? Or I'm an engineer, or I'm an IT professional. But that's really not what I realize you're an IT accountant. Like, I get that part, right, of who you are. But if they say that, then it's just an interesting way to open up the psychology, and please don't credit it to me, because there'll be people emailing me, and it was a technique that GE used a lot back in the late 90s, because they wanted to know how you think. 15 minutes left, okay, got it. Is that helpful? I will wait literally, I would wait for hours for somebody to explain it, but very few humans can make it through 30 seconds or so. It's rare. Another follow-up question. I can hear you. It was turned off and then turned back on and then turned back on. No, you're good. It was on. Just give it you're good. No? Just speak loudly. I'll try and repeat the question. Yeah.
Well, the second question is, I hear this thing called psychometric tests. What this means
Psychometric? Like a psychology or a personality?
for interviews and so on. And I wanted to know whether you use it in your company.
We don't. This is way outside my expertise. I have participated in them a lot over the years. Everything from trimetrics to Myers-Briggs to the DISC evaluation. There are a lot of true believers in these tools. I'm kind of in and out on them. We do not use them at all, primarily because of our general counsel and her kind of view of the tests and whether or not they're I know the vendors will tell you they're legally defensible and all those things, but what it gets down to is, are they helpful to your process? Are they going to make you change your mind about somebody? We don't use them. Never have. We do have the Myers-Briggs for leadership that wants to use that in the organization. It's not used for an assessment. We do have 360, so I'm not talking about a completely foreign HR system to you, but we don't use personality, psychological evaluations, anything like that, or even really, sort of quantitative thinking tests. We don't do that. We don't do that. The decision for that is based on a fairly long reason I can explain to you. Yes?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I've loved that talk, and I've learned
Thank
a
you.
lot. But we usually face challenges. I'm also into HR. But people can really put up a show. Now that internet is around, we can Google and we can know so much about an organization.
Sure.
Even the frequently asked questions, and they really come prepared for you. How do you safeguard against such good people who put up a very good show to pass the interview, and yet, after you've hired them, they're totally different? How do you safeguard them?
Yeah, that's a good question. How do you screen for the fakers, right? What we do is we make interviews very long, right? And they happen a lot. So when I interviewed for my position back in 2012, I interviewed with 27 people over a course of 2 months. And I'm still trying to recover from it, frankly. It's 5 years ago. The interviews were the most bizarre. The first person I interviewed with prayed for me. That's a risky play these days, especially if you're sitting across from at that time, a 15-year HR person. That's a risky play to make. But we make them long, and they're extensive, and the reason for that is because we believe that just about any human can act for 8 hours straight. It's harder at 16, 24 it's really hard, at 48 it's super hard. And we encourage people to bring their families with them. Because your family is actually knows more about you than you do, right? So we have nice dinners together where we get to see all elements of your family, however it's defined. So it's hard to hide when if Joshua was here, you would figure out pretty fast who I was. I'm pretty much like this, but you would see him and you would see me. You would see really who I am. That's the way we do it. It's a very long process. A lot of people just pull out of it because it's so exhausting. I should have, probably. I got a question in the back. I'll come to you, promise.
So I understand hiring for integrity, but you as an officer of the organization,
Yes.
you have individuals in your call center that are handling very emotional, difficult calls
We do.
for 8, 10 hours at a time.
Mm-hmm.
From an integrity standpoint, what are you doing from an EAP or an on-site to help those individuals that are taking those calls over and over?
Yeah. We have EAP. We have a extremely aggressive care for you employee program. So tomorrow kicks off our board of directors meeting, and it also kicks off an entire week of employee appreciation. literally every day for 8 hours, we're going to do some major thing for our employees. It's everything from giving away stock to giving away PTO. It all culminates in an 8-hour EAW celebration this Friday, which is literally close the company, and the CEO goes out and literally physically hugs, thanks, or handshakes every employee of the corporation in a week's time. We have all of our team leaders in the call center. Every week, we have a team accomplishment and a team success huddle. We call them huddles. Some people do it every single day. Leadership has the ability to be flexible. We require at least one a week. And we do that because we realize how much stress people are under and the pressure that people are under. But we want those people to be kind, compassionate. But in order to be that way, they have to be treated that way, right? I mean, you've seen the United thing and the Delta thing. It's highly unlikely that that flight attendant felt cared for, right? However you see it, right? I know videos and all that stuff. I'm just saying that we never want that to happen, and we want our employees to feel cared for. We do have the normal EAP. We do have the resources available to help people deal with, 10 hours of leukemia and children calls, which would be brutal, as you can imagine. But when you've got that such long tenure, we're clearly doing something right. These folks do feel cared for, or you wouldn't. It's not like they're stuck in the call center. You could go to the call center and go anywhere in the firm. In fact, a lot of people do. But a lot of people stay just because they feel so cared for there. It's very unusual. I realize it sounds like I'm talking about a foreign land, but it's very unusual. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
the presentation and the interaction so far. And I think I like the idea of coming with the family. But
Yeah, it's very non-traditional. It'll make your legal team very nervous.
I think
Very nervous.
in Africa, some people would turn up with 20 people.
Yeah, good. Yeah, we're good with that. I mean, let me comment on that. We will literally invite whoever they want to have, whether they, bring somebody with you, bring a friend with you, bring a whatever, and we go out and have dinner several times, and it's the way you're right, because of the glass door and all the interview cheaters out there, you're going to have to do something way different. And a psychological evaluation or a test, they're usually pretty smart. The people that can fake it for 8 hours and get through an interview, believe me, are going to blow your standardized tests away. It's not going to help. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, maybe before I ask the question, I just wanted to comment about that, those psychometric tests.
Mm-hmm.
In our place, we use them a lot because sometimes you advertise for 10 positions and you get like 2,000 applicants.
Sure.
So we do it as a preliminary to reduce on the numbers.
Right.
Then we go through the other processes. Now, something you mentioned as you were making the presentation is about it's not easy to do it when you have something like acquisition or mergers, to hire people with ethical
Right.
conduct. So I would want to know, okay, you are talking about a stable organization. but
Right.
These days, it is the in thing to have acquisition and mergers. So what would you advise, what advice would you give to HR people who are faced with handling acquisition and mergers? Is there a better way to do it so that you can keep the good
Can retain
culture?
you can retain the culture.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. And the reason why is because I hailed from Bank of America. I was there 9 years. And I was there during, what anybody watching externally would have called a massive acquisition binge. 33 banks, I believe, were, by the time I got out of there, were acquired. And there is no doubt about it. By the fifth or sixth equal size or maybe even larger size acquisition, the culture that I knew from the beginning was just gone. Now, whose fault was that? Was that just the integration of literally 100,000 new employees from all these different places? I don't know. It had something to do with it for sure. Was it the fact that leadership was constantly in transition as this thing was growing? You had these stable people that were all of a sudden spread out all over the place, and then put in with other people from these other corporations. Did that have something to do with it? I don't know the answer, but I will tell you this, that by the time I left, you could not have had a more different culture. And it was the culture that was written about, right? It's the Enron values, right? You could see that didn't change, but the reality in your experience, or my experience, was totally different. It wasn't that it all of a sudden became a pirate ship of, swashbucklers or whatever these pirates are doing. But it was totally different and completely unattractive to me, frankly. It was just, so I don't have the answer to that, I'm sorry. I wish I did. I would probably write a book.
Well, on that note.
No more book writing. If I didn't get to your question, please, I'll stay and we'll interact.
Thank you, Kevin, for such a thought-provoking discussion.